It's not just an aesthetic, it's deeper than hair. Good evening, everyone. Mi nombre es Karla Arroyo. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. And I would like to thank you all so much for being here with my classmates tonight. For the past 16 months, I've listened to and engaged with a community I am a part of. Black and Brown people who are subject to or have lived experiences of hair discrimination at work, school, or society in general. It wasn't until I returned back to natural in August 2016 where I thought to myself, I'm tired of having to straighten my hair for job interviews. Why must I alter the hair that naturally grows out of my scalp in order to be respected? But the feeling was deeper than that. I wanted to break away from the European beauty standards that my family and those around me imposed on me since I could remember. I felt so empowered by my crown after returning to my roots, pun intended, that I took it upon myself to collaborate with women with similar backgrounds and similar hair textures. We hosted and attended natural hair appreciation events, served as brand ambassadors for natural hair product lines. I fell in love with my hair's texture. I even experimented and tried different colors because if you haven't noticed, I like and I want change. But to achieve change, you must understand its origins first. Discrimination dates as far back to the transatlantic slave trade, where millions of Africans were forcefully transferred to the Americas and were constantly dehumanized. Slave owners and colonizers often referred to African hair as wool and even saw them as animals. This led to a beauty standard that requires the alteration of a Black or brown person's physical identity in order to resemble European features like straight hair and light skin. Ever since, the notion that Black hair is problematic and inferior was internalized. European beauty standards affect Black and Brown people in many ways, and in this case, physically and financially. According to a 2019 study done by the Joy Collective, Black women are 1.5 times more likely to be sent home from work due to their hair. 83% of Black women reported being more likely to be judged harshly on their looks as opposed to white women. And in case you're wondering, this is the type of hair and hairstyles that are very beautiful, but also put Black and Brown people at mental, physical, emotional, and financial risk. Most of us can't change our physical identity. So, yes, hair discrimination goes much deeper than aesthetics. This is people's lives. But members of my community decided to tackle that when Senator Holly J. Mitchell authored and signed the Crown Act into law on July 3rd, 2019, now known as Crown Day. The Crown Act is a state legislation that protects Black people from race-based hair discrimination at work and at schools. 7 states currently have the Crown Act and 3 municipalities. The Crown Act was also recently passed in the House on September 21st, 2020. Through my reporting and engagement with my community, I learned they did not have enough support to address hair discrimination. So I created the Deeper Than Hair newsletter, a monthly service done in tandem with the Crown campaign with 3 goals: educate, advocate, and uplift. We educate our community by providing them with Crown-related updates, such as the UPS changing their hair policy to be more inclusive. We also advocate for them by supporting them and offering them examples of advocacy letters, which are written by the Crown campaign, which hair discrimination victims can use to address their legislator, school district, or their employer. And we uplift them by offering them a safe space to share their hair discrimination stories, which will then be published on my personal blog, carlizisway.com, or on our social media channels to draw awareness. I launched my first newsletter issue last month alongside 58 subscribers. In that period, I landed a 51.2 open rate, which surpasses the MailChimp average of 21.33%. But it took over 2 semesters to get to this point. Thanks to my classmate Jake, I learned about the Crown Conference at Rutgers University in January, where I met Crown Act leaders and also a group of women who helped amplify my work tremendously at the J School. Following the conference, I joined the Crown Campaign's Village as their inaugural fellow a week later. So missing class for this event was well worth it. The Crown Campaign is an interdisciplinary grassroots organization and a growing village that advocates against hair discrimination and supports legal protections like the Crown Act. The organization's principles consist of uplifting the voices of people with lived experiences of hair discrimination, authentic engagement with victims, and believing that even one person can create change in their community. We hosted our first virtual event in May, the Deeper Than Hair Conversation, where we educated the public on the relationship between natural hair and identity in our society. Ideally, this would have been an in person event, but due to COVID, we had to readjust. However, one advantage of the lockdown was that we were able to reach people from different regions of the world, such as South Africa. I use Twitter to promote this event along with my other related projects. Since Twitter is an open forum, I used it as my main source of promotion because one tweet can end up on so many timelines, especially when you at people and you use hashtags. The Crown campaign built their audience on Instagram in 2019 and fed into Facebook. They share their content throughout both mediums, but receive more likes and shares on Facebook, which 79.1% of women make up. Instagram worked the least for me as it's very visual and people want to see aesthetics. Hence why my sorority, Omega Phi Beta, asked me to host a live session on how to style natural hair. I reached more millennials on Instagram, which taught me I want and need to maintain that audience throughout. After all, we are the future. The connections I built through the Crown campaign and my goal to amplify my community led me to write the story of Randy Woodley and her grandson Tink during my summer internship at Culture Hub. Randy is a Black woman whose freedom was put in jeopardy after her grandson's school in Tatum, Texas, discriminated against his hair and isolated him from other students, leading her to switch him to an out-of-district school at the time. My goals of educating, advocating, and uplifting my community were proven successful by the feedback I received from them. Most of my newsletter responses came from people I didn't know, which showed me that my work is more than just text. It's a safe and important space for people who have lived experiences of hair discrimination. While it may have taken me a year to solidify the best product for my community, I learned that nothing you release will be in its final form the first time. And it's also important for me to be clear about language. This project supports the Crown Act, but it is not a part of the Crown Act. I also learned that I don't know everything. So I must always keep my ears open so I can keep my work sustainable. Like I mentioned earlier, the work doesn't end here. I plan to run the Deeper Than Hair newsletter for at least 1 year and continue to expand with the Crown campaign by empowering potential Crown champions in states that haven't been introduced to the Crown Act. I also plan to collaborate with like-minded organizations. Through that, I want to share my most important mission, which is to pass the crown. Thank you all so much for listening to my presentation. And employers, if you're listening, I can clock in tomorrow. Thank you very much.